I like shooting these outside. It's quite a nice vibe, so I'm gonna try it again in a different location. How much we're exposed to our culture growing up can strongly impact and influence who we become as adults. Now, growing up in high school or secondary school, depending on where you're from, I wasn't overly fond of people of my own ethical background. And I think that was mostly because a lot of people that went to my school were, in fact, first generation immigrants. Now, I wasn't, because it was my grandparents who actually originally moved to this country, and not my parents. And because of that, because of the fact that only one generation separated us, I just felt like we were vastly different people in terms of culture and how we perceived the world around us. And honestly, I shunned them slightly because of the fact that we were so different. It just felt quite weird to me that they would like build their own little groups and speak in their own language at school. And I don't know why, because surely it made sense, right? You would come from a different country to this country, you would want to get to know people who at least are of your background and speak the same language as you to, I guess, more easily acclimatize to your new surroundings. And I can only see that in retrospect, because back in the day I just thought it was quite strange and I didn't want any part of it. Even though as I would walk across them, not across them, but through them, past them, like even as I would walk past them in the corridor, I would understand what they were saying, because it was the same language my parents would speak to me in at home a lot of the time. So even though I understood it, I still didn't really want to communicate with them, which is a strange concept now that I think about it. I think it was only during my young adulthood, not that I'm particularly old now, but I would say in the last 7, maybe 8 years, where I truly began to, I guess, appreciate my background a lot more. And I think university played into that quite well. I think the reason for that was because I was exposed to so many international people from so many different places all around the world, and I saw how much fun that they were having, not only being able to express who they were and where they come from, but also assimilating to various other cultures. So it wasn't like that they were just coming from Malaysia or Singapore or the United States or Japan and just integrating with people from the UK, but it was as though those people from those places were integrating amongst each other as well, and it was just expressing a whole different international outlook on each other's lives. And I felt I couldn't sort of bring that value, if that makes sense, because I'd stripped away a lot of my sort of ethical background and heritage in the way that I was living life. I couldn't add that value, that sort of perception to their life. And I brought a very, I guess, British mode of living as opposed to something that is a bit more enhanced and aligned with my background, and something that I could bring to their lives as well. The thing is with London is that you could honestly be exposed to every sort of culture from around the world existing in some pocket in this city, and even if you were trying to look for them or you weren't trying to look for them, inevitably you would come across these pockets and you'd be in awe at all the things that you were seeing, all these like bakeries, all these places that sold various, I guess, confectionaries from across the world, and you're like, whoa, what is this? Let me check this out. And at least that's how I've come to appreciate these places. And to me, it's quite an enjoyable experience when you find a little niche that's dedicated to Vietnam or Thailand, or perhaps a store where they sell like candy from America. Or I guess I found a Peruvian restaurant the other day, and next to it was a Peruvian grocery store as well, and I thought that was quite cool as well. And it's just that you have all these pockets that sort of intertwine into the culture of London, and it was a shame that I couldn't then add to that. Like, I wasn't doing anything to enhance the culture of those around me, and I felt that that was a bit of a shame. I felt like I should have been doing that, and I think what partly added to that was just the way that my day-to-day was laid out. I would go to like a specialty coffee place or a specialty tea place with tea from Japan or coffee from Peru, and a few hours later I might get chai from some street food vendor, some Indian street food vendor no less, who was selling chai, and then a few hours later I would have street food from Korea or somewhere else, and it was just like I was fully engrossed in this experience. And I was like, this is very strange, because even though day by day I'm living this experience where I'm exposed to all these different things from all these different places across the world, and they are doing their unique parts to sort of expose me to those things, I wasn't reciprocating. Not that anyone asked me to, but I just thought it would be nice if I could, even in my circles, like my friend groups and stuff, if I could bring a little bit of that level of perception. I thought it'd be quite nice. And I'm grateful because of all these people from university who were from all these international backgrounds, and people who were also from my background, who began to slowly edge me back into, I guess, assimilating my culture both directly and indirectly, by listening to Bollywood music or watching Bollywood movies or eating more Indian food even when we went out, and not just getting like pizza or fish and chips or burgers or something, like to actually try restaurants from my own cultural heritage, and just little things like that, where I began to slowly learn the nuances as well from other people who are also from an Indian background but from slightly different locations, and just understanding how things differed slightly. And I'm very grateful for those experiences, because I think they taught me a lot. And at the time they seemed minuscule, but in retrospect they do aggregate to a lot. And it's strange, because now I'm at a point in my life where I can speak to my parents about some of the songs that they would listen to growing up, and me being able to recognize the artist, or talk about some of the movies that they used to watch growing up and some of the old Indian actors. And it's a strange feeling to be able to speak to my parents about a lot of the things I didn't speak to them about growing up, about some of the songs and the food and just the culture in general. I think I just avoided speaking about it a lot of the time, and I never really understood why. But it's nice that I can do that. It feels like I'm playing catch up slightly, but it's nice because I feel as though I'm starting to engross myself in something that I should have done a long time ago. And it's never too late. Saying that, I'm also proudly trying to also relearn the language. Now, even though I knew it slightly growing up, I lost it because of my silly decision not to communicate with anyone in school who also spoke that same language, but also just because I was reluctant to speak to my parents or my grandparents in Gujarati or in Hindi. And I'm now at this point in my life where, like I said, I'm re-assimilating these aspects. So in part of that endeavor, I'm also trying to relearn the language, because I think it'll be nice. Yeah, that's pretty much the reason. And on the topic of Bollywood movies, one of the movies that really inspired this sort of thought pattern was a movie I saw last year, called Swadesh. And forgive me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly to my ethical brothers and sisters. I may still not be perfect at all the pronunciations, but I'm getting there. The story follows Shah Rukh Khan's character called Mohan, I believe. And in that movie, Mohan is a NASA engineer of sorts. And he hears about his nanny in a village in India who used to look after him when he was growing up. And because his parents were no longer with him, that nanny was like a mother to him. And because he was living in the States at this time, he chooses to go to the village in India to hopefully get his nanny to come with him back to the States in hopes that he can show her a better life. in his mission to sort of bring his nanny over from the village, he's exposed to all sorts of kinds of people, ways of life, and just different ways of thinking that he was never, I guess he never perceived to begin with, because that's not how he was raised. And when he went to the States, he was fully engrossed in that ecosystem, in that environment. And because of that, when he went to take his nanny back to the States, he was so shocked and mind blown. And in the end, he decided to stay with the nanny in the village. Obviously, there was a girl involved, and there's other takeaways from that movie. But generally, it's an interesting concept, because it was, to some extent, that narrative is about him going back to India to relearn some of his culture and realize how inviting it is for him, so much so that he wants to stay there. Now, I know that's not completely comparable with what I'm saying right now, but it's interesting because I think the movie speaks to the Indian within me, who's trying to sort of relearn and reassimilate my culture to some extent, and trying to relearn a lot of the things that I have lost growing up. So yeah, it's a very good movie. But I can safely say that I am starting to successfully bring a little bit of essence of my culture to these conversations, to other people in my friend groups who might not have been exposed to certain things before, and that's enabling them to try new foods, to listen to specific songs, or watch certain movies that they may not have watched before. Ooh, that was a strong breeze. But yeah, and I think it's nice that I can begin to add a bit of that flavour to our conversations. Of course, there's nuances to this, because not every piece of our ethical background can make it to wherever we end up in life. And that's why immigration is a thing, right? That's why people choose to move, because there's something about their other culture that you're like, okay, maybe some elements of that would be more favourable to the kind of person I am, and which is fine. But I think as long as we don't lose touch completely with our background and show a bit of both in our day-to-day life, we can fully begin to appreciate both sides of our life. Ultimately, the accumulation of those two cultures enables you to make the most of the world around you, and it also enables you to bring a bit of buzz to everything that you do. And yeah, I think it's quite a nice thing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Just taking the view for a second, actually, because it's quite nice. The sun's setting, so it's going to be completely dark in a second.